And then thank you, Sasha, for reminding me. I have about a problem of remembering to cue you on that. Jory Wolf has joined Magellan after 22 years as the CIO of the city of Santa Monica, where he launched the Santa Monica City Wi-Fi, and it provides free internet services to the public through a network of 32 hot zones, wireless coverage in most commercial and transit corridors throughout the city. He created Santa Monica's CityNet, 100 gigabit broadband initiative to support an environment for local businesses to compete in the global economy with cutting edge network solutions. He has over 35 years of experience in IT, including broadband, fiber to the home, smart city initiatives. Jory's teams have got over 50 awards for IT projects during his career. And in 2012, he received the CIO Lifetime Achievement Award from the LA Business Journal. And I think we're really quite fortunate to have him working in our particular area. Many of you know, all of you probably do, regarding the Ventura County fiber plan that we've got, and it's being held up constantly as leading the way for what's happening in terms of the regions as they transform. And so we're just very fortunate to have him. In his travels, he has the opportunity to see where all the pieces and parts are flying and where they all fit. And I was invited him to be able to talk today about this shifting landscape. And so I'm going to be very interested to hear what he says. With that, Jory, take it away.
Great. Thank you, Bill. And good afternoon, everyone. Glad you were able to make it for this brown bag lunch on broadband funding. Shifting landscape is quite accurate. There is a lot going on with broadband funding, as we all know, both at the federal level, and I think we've been watching what's going on at the state level. Got a little bit of a call out to our friends up north in Paso Robles for recently getting their award from EDA, a grant that we submitted almost a year ago. For the broadband 1.5 billion with a 20% match. And they were notified about 3 weeks ago that they received the award. And they're now in the process of filing the paperwork and starting all of the contracts and the bidding processes for building their backbone network. As many cities and counties are doing around the region. And I'll get into that in just a little bit more detail as we go. But please know that this presentation is really tailored to California in a large way. It's also somewhat tailored to urban landscapes, although there are rural landscapes within the Tri-County area that the Broadband Consortium of the Pacific Coast serves. So I wanted to be inclusive of tribal and also rural, both at the federal level and at the state level. So some of this may not apply to you who are in urban centers, but it may apply to others who are on the call or who may want to review the slide deck at a later date. Again, tailored for the Tri-County region. Our agenda today, I'm going to go into some definitions a little bit. I'm going to talk about some background about what grants do, which is to serve unserved and underserved areas of broadband within the state and within the country. We're going to talk about eligibility data, which is used in putting together your broadband grant and funding plans and strategies. We're going to talk about the state plans and what the state is doing with their open access middle mile network. We're going to talk about demographics and eligibility and how you go about doing some of the work to qualify yourself for being eligible. And you're going to talk about grant readiness. It's not just a matter of filling out forms and paperwork. Trust me, there is a lot to be done when it comes to submitting a grant application. There is a term, as you've all heard, it takes a village. It takes a village and some. Also, we'll talk about what's happening at the state and the federal level, the various grant programs that are available to you all. the timelines associated, the amounts of money that are available, and some of the eligibility criteria. Then, of course, I wanted to end with some of the recent legislation in the state of California that was recently signed by the governor. Starting with, okay, what is served and underserved? Grants are intended to provide service to areas that are either that are underserved or are unserved. Grants are also made available for economic development purposes and for building community and for building for jobs and for security as well as public safety. But starting with what is the definition of unserved? California used to describe underserved as communities that had less than 6 megabits down and 1 megabit up. Recently, with the executive order in November of 2020, issued by the governor, the executive order increased that to 100 megabits down and 20 megabits up, with a preferred symmetrical 100 megabits. But any new construction in the state of California for any grants would require, from the state, would require building at minimum 100 megabits down and 20 megabits up. Again, all new construction must meet that new criteria. Federal is still 25 megabits down and 3 megabits up. But one of the things that we all need to deal with when it comes to what is unserved and what is underserved is that these criteria, or should I say this data, is collected by the service industry, by the providers, or from the providers. And the providers are asked to self-disclose the services that they provide in the areas that they have either won RDOF auctions, or where they've received government funds, or are receiving government funds, and they need to disclose their service territories, and it again is self-disclosure. There is no fact finding. The CPUC in the state of California does do some checking and some audits, and they do throw out some data if it doesn't match out, but not necessarily strictly 100% of the cases is that true. In addition to that, the self-reporting data, we all know, is based upon census block. And if there is one household within a census block that is served, it is deemed that all homes or households within the census block are served. So the level of service is overinflated drastically when you consider the size of a census block. Here's some mappings that you are probably aware of. If you're not, I put them up here. There's the FCC 477 data. This is available at the fcc.gov website. I recommend that you take a look at this. Here you'll see broadband deployment in the Tri-County area, starting up here, San Luis Obispo into Santa Barbara County, and then I've highlighted here the Ventura County lines. And you can see there are, of course, many more underserved and unserved communities in rural areas, and that is typical throughout the country and especially throughout the state of California. There is another map source, which is from NTIA, which is more recent than the 477 FCC data. This is available now for about 2.5 years. And the NTIA data also looks at indicators of broadband need. These are both interactive maps, and I strongly recommend that you use them in your determining your eligibility criteria in various areas for your cities or for your counties or for your regions. And here you see a little bit of a different story from the FCC to the NTIA, which is also a federal agency. And you'll see red are underserved areas and unserved areas. And the more red you get, the more unserved you are. And we see that there are several pockets, of course, in northern Ventura County. And then in Ventura County, there are pockets here along the 126 and where the 126 and the 118 merge. We've got large pockets on the eastern side of the coastal range in Santa Barbara County and in San Luis Obispo County as well. Another source of mapping and data comes from the CPUC, and the state has done a good job of collecting information. And they, in this particular map capture that I have, I've captured CASIF funding. And CASIF, the California Strategic Fund, is a fund which is used to fund broadband available, should I say, broadband access in the state of California. And it is, those funds are available from the private sector as well as the public sector. There are some changes in CASA with the new legislation that has been passed, but I'll get into that in more detail at the end of my slide deck. Here you see CASA eligible areas in the Tri-County area, and you'll see a little bit of a similar story about CASA availability in this area, again, between the 126 and the 118 in Ventura County. Similar story, but there are areas of CASA eligibility in the west portions of Santa Barbara County, and it's a real mixed bag in San Luis Obispo County. Yes, go back. There are a couple other new map sources that are available. One is from Lightbox. You could take a look at Lightbox. They have an interactive map source. I did not do some captures from Lightbox, but it tells yet a different story. And Lightbox appears to be very similar or the same as a Broadband Now interactive map, which has just become available around the same time as Lightbox, which was just about a month ago. So if you're interested to see what Broadband Now and Lightbox have done, they have, you can Google those and find those as well. But as a consultant and working in the industry and helping cities and counties understand and regions understand how to go about finding eligibility, we do surveys. Surveys are the most accurate way in which to capture the existing landscape, the served, the unserved, and the underserved within your communities. This is an example of one of our clients we recently worked on with Digital Marin. And the County of Marin was interested, and you would say, are there really any areas in the County of Marin that would indicate the need for broadband? When you looked at the FCC maps and you looked at the California adoption map and you looked at the NTIA maps, they would all say that there is no need. But the county itself had a good idea that Marin City, Marin Wood, the Canal District, and a few others in Marin were pockets where there were underserved, and they wanted to go about proving that, disproving the maps that are available from the feds in the state. And so we went about doing a survey, and we do surveys with almost all of our clients when we do master planning. And we attempted to prove that the county was right, that the economic indicators, because economics and poverty typically goes hand in hand with lack of broadband access, and so does color for that matter. And we did a survey, and lo and behold, we found out that the survey results were accurate and that those areas that they expected were underserved were in fact underserved based upon the survey results. And then based upon the survey results, we went ahead and we developed a broadband routing map of how to solve digital inclusion within the County of Marin. And you can see these areas where we have used existing assets and we have built new assets to get access to build a middle mile to be able to provide last mile to communities of need within the county. I'll stop right here for a moment and just ask if anyone has any questions on any of this material so far. Okay, I'll let you all continue your brown bag lunch. I wouldn't be right if I didn't include some of the plans that the state of California is looking at implementing. And you all have been aware that the state is looking at building and has adopted funds in the state budget, SB 156, to approve $3.25 billion with a B of a middle mile, an open access middle mile state network. And as you can see, it's typically addressed, or should I say, conceptualized and designed along roads and highways. This is the site, the URL that you can get access to this interactive map. I've taken a snapshot of the Tri-County area, and you can see the proposed routes along the 101, along the 5 freeways, and then you see some other highways in the counties of San Luis Obispo, not much, so to speak, in Santa Barbara County, and then in Ventura County, we see coming from the 5 to the 101, along the 126 to the 23, and then down Los Pozos Road into the 101. We've got also a finger going up to Ojai from the middle mile backbone, which is on the 33. Okay, so I wanted to go into the exercise of how it is that we help our clients and how you should be thinking about how you get yourself eligible for these grants. I showed you the maps. I showed you how clients go about doing surveys. And here is an example, just like Marin, where we expected that there were underserved communities in the Ventura County region. Those being along the 126 here between Fillmore and Santa Paula and the city of Ventura. In Somas, Nyland Acres, Satacoy, and El Rio, those all communities are communities of need and are focus areas for the Ventura County Board of Supervisors. We have built, or should I say, designed a network based upon availability of existing assets, some new underground builds, some build on existing aerial poles, some plowing along a rail line, as well as some use of existing traffic signal interconnect that would have to be rehabilitated, but still would save quite a bit of money. And as well, in light blue, the joint build with water and wastewater projects that are occurring within the same window, as our interest in getting grant funds and applying those grant funds and using joint build as a way to reduce the cost of those builds and making our grant money go farther. There's some existing fiber that you see here on the map in yellow. And this network then connects all of the cities in the county, in the southern portion of the county. But how do you make something of this to be able to go and seek grants? And so we are looking for middle mile money to be able to complete the 126 and the 118 routes. And the middle mile money would come from EDA, and we're also looking at some new money which is coming from the state of California through the federal, from the federal government through the state of California for capital projects. And I'll go into that in just a little bit. But the question is, how do you qualify each of these cities for eligibility for last mile? And so we put together a matrix, basically a spreadsheet that is based on demographics and of course eligibility. And this is comparing eligibility with federal projects and programs. And so we've got the county overall, we've got Camarillo, Fillmore, all the cities outlined here. And then based upon population, we've got different availability or eligibility for the city of Ojai for RUS water and wastewater because of their population is 15,000 or less. Same thing holds true for Piru. And then for RUS electric and smart grid, as well as broadband loan and reconnect programs and development and community facilities loan programs and the community connect programs, if you have populations of 20,000 or less, which Fillmore does qualify, they are now eligible for these particular grant funds from the federal government. And then we look at others which are 50,000 or less, and we look to see that Moore Park, Ojai and Miramonte, Port Hueneme, and Santa Paula all qualify for rural business development and renewable energy grants. Okay, I don't see anybody salivating over that. So there is money available, even though you might feel that from the federal government, even though you feel that your city or town is has more than one provider and you may deem yourself served. Okay, before I get into the grants themselves, I want to talk about grant readiness. This is really very key because this is not, again, like I said in the beginning of this webinar, this is not all about filling out forms, although it is filling out forms too, and you have to make sure you fill out the forms correctly, and some of them are very complex, and in some cases, people actually attend webinars to understand and learn how to fill out the forms. Grant writers do this on a regular basis, and whenever new programs come out, I strongly advise that you someone from your team or your grant writer is well versed and has attended a webinar, a recent webinar on filling out the forms for the grants that you're going after. But you need political will because you need the backing of your businesses, your community stakeholders, your leaders in government and the public sector, and your leaders in the private sector as well. You need to make sure that you have scrutinized your eligibility for each of these grant programs. You need to make sure that you're tracking the due dates and the schedules of these grants because they come and go very quickly. Oftentimes the grants come and go as quickly as 90 days. So you need to be watching well in advance to see when they're going to be coming out because you need to be prepared. But you need to be prepared with letters of support from your major employers, from other businesses that will want to relocate to the area or are considering leaving the area, but because of lack of broadband or affordability of broadband. So you need to make sure that you're capturing that support from your businesses, your anchor institutions, all of your chambers of commerce, possibly even your business improvement districts, obviously your leaders, your legislators, both at the local level and at the county and state levels, and your obviously your commissioners, and you have to, it always is good to have an economic development SEDS which is updated for your area. And if you don't have one, it is almost next to impossible to apply for economic development money through the EDA. Again, you also, being shovel ready, you need to have a high level design and you need to know what it's going to cost. You need to know what it is that you're building. You need to show what you're building. There needs to be a diagram and a map. You need to cost what it is. You need to have a bill of materials for all of your labor, for your infrastructure and material costs. And all of that has to be organized and submitted along with the various forms in the grant application. In addition to that, you need to have, in many cases, a preliminary engineering report, especially for the EDA. And a preliminary engineering report characterizes the build, what it's going to look like, what it's going to be made out of, how long it's going to take, where the money is coming from. And you need to have a letter of commitment of funds, especially for the matching portion, if there's a required local match. And many of the federal programs, if not all of them, have a local match requirement. And then, of course, you need to have someone on staff, or you need to hire a grant writer. But most importantly, there are two other points here, and that is that you need to engage with service providers. Why? Unless you're planning on, unless you have experience in operating networks, it's unlikely that you're going to be able to get grant funds or look as good and competitive as others who will get grant funds if you don't have any experience in operating a network. So if you don't have that experience, we strongly recommend that you start talking to potential partners, service providers who have experience in marketing, managing, operating, and maintaining these networks, because that is what the federal government and the state itself as well will be looking for. Recently, it looks like we've got a heads up that we're going to be getting a grant for $38 million, possibly for one of our clients in the state of Arizona, for a little bit of middle mile and a lot of last mile. And that's going to be coming through NTIA Rural. But that didn't come without having partnered with a county partner with a strategic service provider that is has experience in operating that network. Now, it's also important for us all to understand that there's stimulus money still coming, and that the infrastructure bill will be passed probably, if everything goes well, the fourth quarter of this calendar year. That being the case, that money, and most monies of large proportion for programs, are going to the states. Knowing that the states are getting the money, it's important for you to become engaged with your state politicians and representatives, because it's they who will be able to assist you in soliciting the state for your share of those grant funds coming from the infrastructure bill. Very important. You need a service provider, and you should be getting the state, making the state aware that you are shovel ready, or that you are going to be applying and you feel that you are eligible for certain grants, and you need to get them on board and supporting you. Very, very important. Okay, I'm going to get into federal grants, the meat of this presentation. I'm a half hour through, and I think I can make it with a little bit of time for Q&A at the end. But are there any questions in any material that I've provided so far? Any thoughts? Anything? Does it supply? This is kind of like what we've been doing in Ventura so far. And this is what we will be doing with the county of Ventura, and it's what we did with Casa Robles and getting their funding. Okay.
Hey, Jory, I had a quick question, but is there, in terms of with communications division, should people be looking to talk to the CPUC for setting these things up, or would that be helpful, or should they be focusing more on the state electeds?
It doesn't hurt to talk to as many people as you possibly can. So I strongly encourage you to speak with the CPUC. Whenever the CPUC does have comment periods open now, because they're interested in hearing back about the plans for the middle mile backbone, and also digital inclusion funds of $1 billion each for rural and also for urban counties. So as they request information or comments, please feel free to comment. And at the same time you're commenting, if you feel that you can provide value to what the state is planning on doing, like what Brian did in Moore Park, then we strongly recommend you do that as well. Brian, you want to share what you did when the comment period was open on the open access middle mile network?
Yeah, so we're actively working and pursuing so far building a meet me room here in Moore Park adjacent to our civic center. And of key interest to us is that when the state released its draft middle mile map, not only did they come into Moore Park through the State Highway 118, they also utilized State Highway 23, which is literally the street that that City Hall is built on. So we're talking about a meet me room that we hope could be leveraged by the state as part of its middle mile network, just a couple hundred feet away from their main line. So I do owe a debt of gratitude to Chris on the call right now for figuring out the best way to convey that to the state. And Moore Park did send a letter or provide a comment to the PUC as they are scoping out their middle mile project that, hey, we have a piece of infrastructure here that's roaring to go and is past the concept stage and into the, yes, we're doing a market study, and by the time the state realistically does anything, we will have that available to partner with. So we provided those comments formally, and those comment period is ongoing.
Yeah, that was a good move on your part, Brian. Well done.
Ray, before you move forward, I just wanted to flag Jimmy Fleming, Ojai. Jory, thank you for the slide earlier where you talked about the RUS grants and the fact that they're looking at those populations, and you had certain colors with certain communities listed. We do need, I think we probably do want to look at Fillmore, Ojai, Piru, in the context of some of those grants. There's missed opportunities if we're not acting. And so let's rub two sticks together, see if we can put together some proposals and applications in those three communities and go after these. So thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay. I'm going to focus on federal programs first, and please know that I threw out all the federal programs that have already come and gone, and many of them have closed over the course of the last month or even 2 months. So I'm not going to be covering those. I'm also not going to be covering any of the programs from the feds that go directly to the states, and you have no influence about how to get that money. I don't want to bore you with any of the details about what goes directly to the state and you don't have access to. And some of these deadlines are coming up very quickly, and so I'm really advising everyone to pay very close attention to the deadlines for the filing periods. But let me work through this. There's quite a bit. There's 2 pages of federal funding, and then there's almost a page of California funding. So let's work our way through all of this. It's kind of a little dry material, but it is important to consider. So starting with ARPA, and we strongly recommend that the discretionary funds that are provided to cities and counties through ARPA, through states, is very key and an important source of funds. We have many clients over 8 clients who have dedicated monies from their ARPA distributions for broadband last mile and for middle mile backbone within their communities. They've gone to council and they've already gotten that approval. But please know that the ARPA funds are targeted in areas for broadband in areas where there are unserved or underserved, and with the need for a wireline connection or a broadband connection of greater than the federal standard of 25.3. And that these funds are to be used to build broadband at minimum standards of 100 megabits and 20 megabits up. The number or the amount varies by agency, and that's based upon population and other demographics. And then if you are a non-entitlement agency, there are distributions for those agencies that have populations of less than 50,000. And they got allocations as well, but those were in the thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars rather than in the millions of dollars. Those funds are going to be allocated in two distributions. One is already out, the other one is still due to come out, and those funds need to be spent before the end of 2024. The next program is the Coronavirus Capital Projects, and this is a very key one. You're going to see this showing on the California slide as well. Please note that the window for this one closes the end of this calendar year. The due date for notifying the feds that you have an interest in securing capital projects money is 12/27 of 21. If you and you don't need to be filing in great detail at this point in time, but you do need to have a foothold. You need to let them know, and you need to file of your intent to submit a more thorough application by the due date. And if you don't, you can't afterward. So please take advantage of this, because we strongly believe that the capital fund, which is being distributed to the states and coming through the state of California, which has been allocated $540 million, is a very key way for your community to be able to use federal money through the state for building broadband. And this is all for resilience and recovery from COVID-19. And I'll go into this in a little bit more detail on California slide. There's the federal infrastructure bill, which we all know is coming. We expect that there's going to be there has been $42 billion set aside for distribution to the states, with a baseline of $100 million for each. That's again the baseline. We expect the bill to pass, and again Q4 of 2021. We expect that the window for applying for those funds will take place sometime in Q1 of 2022. These are for competitive grants through the NTIA. There's $1 billion allocated for new middle mile grant programs. There's $2 billion for tribal through NTIA. There's $14.2 billion for affordable connectivity subsidy, for continuation and an extension of the EBB, or Emergency Broadband Benefit Program, of $50 per household. There's also USDA, our US Reconnect, and then this is for rural populations, rural communities of less than 20,000. And you also must have operational experience to use Reconnect money. And that's why it's important for you to have a provider available for you in their grant submittal. It's a 100% grant of up to 25 million. There's a 50% loan program and 50% grant program as well, of 25 million for each for the grants, and 100% for the loan, for the loan program up to $15 million. And this program for our US Reconnect closes in December, on December 24th of 21. Likewise, there's from our US, there's a Community Connect program. And this is also for rural communities, in this case with populations of less than 20,000. A 15% match is required for this. There's a total of 35 million available for 2021. The maximum award for this program was $3 million per project. This project is closed, but we expect this program is going to reopen, and that would be for in Q4 of 2021 for 2022. And then just recently, in the tail end of September, USDA announced $3 billion of digital equity money for agriculture, animal health, and nutrition. I don't know that any of your communities in Ventura County qualified for this. Probably may not be the case in Ventura County, but for agriculture, viticulture, Santa Barbara and San Luis Obispo counties may qualify for that money. Other federal programming sources, there's the USDA emergency rural redevelopment grants for rural healthcare, total amount of $500 million. In this case, there's two tracks. The funds must be spent by September 30th to 2023. Track 1 begins in November of this year, and track 2 begins in January 1st of 2022. So again, very short deadlines for many of these upcoming grants, and this is something that everyone needs to continue to watch. There's a total of, again, $500 million, and this is for rural areas for increasing telehealth in those regions. There is also NTIA money, $268 million. And this is for historically Black colleges and universities and tribal universities, or for others, minority serving institutions or consortiums and their applicants. This is for internet service or for equipment or for hiring and training tech personnel for local workforce. Some new programs which were recently issued from EDA, and you'll see those on the remainder of this page, are Build Back Better, the Economic Adjustment Assistance to Statewide Planning and Research, as well as Indigenous Communities. The EDA has come out with these programs in addition to their other economic development programs, which are ongoing. And you'll see for Build Back Better, there is $1 billion available. Phase 1 provides for $500,000 for planning of the Build Back Better region. And I'll go into that in just a moment. But this would fund in Phase 2 a more thorough grant application, and you would be able to obtain monies from $25 million all the way up to $75 million in Phase 2. And it is possible to submit an application for all the way up to $100 million. We have one client in particular right now that is applying for Build Back Better. Please know that Phase 1 deadline is October 19th. And Build Back Better is really creating layers in an onion. It's not just one institution or one city, it is a region, and it is a region for calling out economic development for either healthcare or and all the related services that go along with that, hospitals, physicians, clinics, need for building roadways, helicopter transport, for food services and other hospitality services, everything that goes along with healthcare or manufacturing. We are aware and working with some states and with multiple counties and with county coalitions that are looking at large areas for Build Back Better, and they're making their cases for Phase 1 of these grants. I think that if you have not started on Build Back Better, you should have started at least a month ago. And it would be pretty difficult for you to get everything that's required at this point. I left it in just so that you know about Build Back Better in case that you hear about it. Because of the grant awards being so large, I didn't want you to think that I didn't include it, and there might be other things that are missing from this presentation. There's also the Economic Adjustment Assistance from EDA for $500 million. These funds, there is no deadline, and these funds will be available until the funds are expired. And this is again for high growth business sectors and industries, for broadband, energy, flexible and natural infrastructure, and various business incubators and accelerators. And this would be available within your community through EDA. And this is actually economic adjustment is one of the areas besides the California capital project allocation from the feds that we think that you could use and apply for in the Tri-County area. Statewide planning grants also are available for mapping efforts and for technical assistance plans for broadband planning and deployment. $59 million is available for that, and you need to submit your application no later than the end of this month. Last but not least, the federal programs that I'm going to touch on are Indigenous Communities, and there is $268 million that needs to be applied for between now and September. At the end of September of 2022, this is for Indigenous communities, and this is not for only recovery from coronavirus, but also for their protection and preparation for any future pandemics or any future economic disasters. Okay, any questions on the federal side? So there were two programs that you could qualify for on the federal side, and there still is time to submit for. Brian?
Jory, I have a question on specifically the EDA's Economic Adjustment Assistance Program. So that looks like it's a competitive grant, and it seems to me that a regional effort would probably be more successful at competing than any of our individual jurisdictions. Are you aware of any effort to look at that funding by the county that we could all jump on and throw our eggs in that lobbying basket? Or is it just too soon to figure that out yet?
We became aware of this months ago, and we have surfaced this. We are still talking to Bruce Stensley about it. This is on our plate.
Thank you.
Definitely. And good point. This does go much farther when you look at a larger region and the approach that the county is taking. Okay. I'm going to move into California funding, and I had shared with you earlier SB 156, and this is approved as part of the state budget. This funds $3.25 billion for the open access middle mile network that I showed you a map of earlier, and I suggest you go to that interactive map if you have any questions. There's also a lot of material on the state website, the CPUC, and the Advanced Technology Fund, and the State Technology Department or Department of Technology available for you. In addition to the $3.25 billion for the open access middle mile state network, there's $1 billion set aside for rural counties and another $1 billion set aside for urban counties. I believe that Ventura County is designated as urban, so they would be participating in that pot. I'm not certain about San Luis Obispo or Santa Barbara at this point in time. But please know that they, in the state, the 58 counties all will share based upon that designation, the 1 billion with the rest of those with that same designation. And each of them are going to get $5 million apiece. That's the baseline. So Ventura County is going to get $5 million to do what they will with this from the state broadband program. And in addition to that, they will share based upon their proportionate share of underserved or unserved communities relative to all of the other counties within the same rural or urban designation. In addition to the 3.25 plus the billion and billion, There's 550 million in a loan loss reserve program. We have many clients that are looking very seriously at the loan loss reserve. Reason is it's a 1% loan. It's almost free money. And you don't have to pay it back until your network is mature and you're generating revenue from it. So we have about 5. Well, there's one on the fence. We have 4, almost 5 communities in the state that are looking at the 750 million and competing for that. Okay. In addition to that, I talked to you about the Capital Projects Fund. Again, California is going to get 540 million of that. So you've got your ARPA money, you've got the SB 156 money, the 1 billion or the 5 million plus whatever is left over for the designation. You could access the 750 million, and now you've got Capital Projects Fund of 540 million, and you need to let them know that you're interested in applying. You need to let a state representative know, and you should file before December 27th of this year. And this is, again, going to go after communities that have particular needs, and those which this could be for water, this could be for wastewater. This isn't just broadband, but it includes broadband. So please know that, and if you include broadband with water and wastewater, you get some extra points, in our opinion. Because this is open and very competitive, especially will include urban communities, we expect that you should rally around this and make sure that you get your interest known, you communicate with your state representatives, and you get your support locally that you need, that I spoke of earlier, so that you could start working on this particular grant application. Interestingly, there's also a California Tribal Fund. There's an award of $167,504 per tribe. The application for that, the deadline is June 1st of 2022. And this is for various feasibility studies, or it could go to fund infrastructure build, but we don't understand how much infrastructure you'd be able to build with such a small allotment. So we see this mostly for studies. And then there's RAISE, which is a transportation fund for the state. It's going to be $100 million by state. It's going to be up to $25 million per project related to roads and highways, with a 20% match required. That also, the match could come from other state grants or other state funds. So you, in this case, unlike with the federal programs, you can't match, you can't use matching federal funds or federal funds for matching. In this particular state program, you can't. And this is really a program that we expect will open in Q1 of 2022. The funding should close sometime around July 12th of 2022. But keep this one in mind and keep your eye on this too, because there's up to 25 million. Now, please know that the roads will eat up quite a bit of the broadband funding that you have. But while you're working on roads and you apply for this money for your roads or for your highways, you should be putting in broadband. And that's a dig once philosophy, and that is what the state is trying to spend the money on. Encouraging Caltrans and other transit and transportation agencies that are public at all levels of government in the state to work on building broadband when they build roads and maintain roads. Any questions about the state programs? Okay, so you probably thought there'd be no money for you, but there is some, and I hope that this was helpful. Please know that there has been recent legislation that's been passed in the state, SB 4, SB 28, SB 378, AB 14, and AB 41, all recently signed by the governor. And these are all important programs or legislation, I should say, bills that have been passed, which support broadband in the state of California at new service levels to be built at 100 megabits down and 20 megabits up to allow local government to participate in building broadband and being able to get grants from the state for dig once within the state, and encouraging franchise agreements and Caltrans to work on building broadband when they build other infrastructures, to provide continued funding of $150 million for the state Casa fund, and to extend broadband mapping for the state. There's lots and lots of good stuff in here that is important for broadband, and the state is now setting itself as a leader in leading funding for broadband in California. SB4 has a sister bill, which was AB 14. SB4 would not have passed if AB 14 hadn't passed, and vice versa. They both did, and that is now providing the Casa funding until December 31st of 2032, again at the amount of $150 million per year. The goal of SB4 is that broadband will be provided at no less than 98% of all households by December 31st of 2032. And that is the end of the presentation. And I'm open for discussion or any questions that you may have. And we're on the hour, but the takeaway here, Bill, as you said, is that there's local monies that we should be seeking for some of these communities whose demographics meet eligibility requirements at the federal level. There's the eligibility for the capital projects. There's the RAISE funding, which is coming. There's ARPA funds that are currently available to cities and counties for their distributions. And there's also some tribal money for tribal communities, both at the state and also at the federal level.
Jory, it's very comprehensive. Are these slides going to be something that we can share with everybody?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. I mean, I appreciate just it's a wealth of knowledge and information, and I'm sure a lot of people will be wanting to benefit from it.
Yeah. Again, this is tailored for the Tri-County region, so there's rural included in here, and I know some of you are not rural communities, but I included them and touched on them for those who are.
Thanks, Jory. It was great.
Good.
George, do you have any time for questions? I know we're at the
I
hour
do.
here.
Yeah, absolutely. Go
Okay,
ahead.
thanks. And thank you so much for this. This is really super. And I was going to ask specifically about AB 14 and SB4, whether there's any specific funding there. And one of the things I think, we're kind of facing here is, council sees that all these broadband bills are coming, and, there's a perception that the government's going to take care of this, the state or the federal government's going to take care of this, and we locally don't need to do anything. And I'm trying to, how do I best combat that and position, we've got some ARPA projects that we had targeted, and now they may be pulled back due to some of these, these state bills. And I know it's kind of a loaded question, but it seems, is it good to try and position ARPA with SB 156, or how best to approach leadership with response to that?
Well, it's a mixed bag and a double-edged sword, Kevin. Oxnard, you have the benefit of having done a master plan, so you, in a sense, are shovel ready, which means that you're probably would be more competitive than others who aren't shovel ready to compete for some of these federal and state programs. On the other hand, we are experienced for those programs that have come and gone over the course of the last 3 to 4 months. There has been 5 times the number of applications expected and 8 times the amount of money requested that what was available. So if that's any indicator of the level of competition, Bird in the hand versus two in the bush is the question you have to ask yourself.
Okay, thank you.
Good question, Devin. We've noticed, and this is just human nature. I think, we had many more. I think we had almost a dozen communities saying that they were going to use their ARPA funds until they found out how much money was becoming available, especially in the 42 billion coming from the infrastructure bill. And everyone wanted to wait and see, well, why should I use money in hand when I can get money out of the bush? And little do they know that it's very competitive. So you need to make that case.
Okay. Can I ask a quick follow-up? Looking at, I'm just reading through SB 156. If you can say that, you've tried to use ARPA or some other source of funding, either with a project, does that stand a better chance of getting funding under SB 156? If you can say, hey, we're leveraging ARPA for this part of it, let's say for a middle mile, and then we want to use SB 156 for last mile, or does it help you to show that you are using or have tried to use other funding in getting these approved?
Absolutely. And you'll get extra points on a state ask when you use ARPA funds from the federal government, because that's exactly what the state wants to encourage. They want people to use federal money first for whatever possible, and they also want to make monies available either through their grants or their loan programs to get federal money. So in either case, if you are asking the state or you're using some state funds to get federal money, that looks better. And if you have experience doing that and you've proven you've done that, they'll know about that, and you are more competitive for future grants. But if you use federal money and couple that with state to offset the state hit, they look very favorably on that. Is very, very key.
Okay, thank you.
And please know that many of these federal agencies and these state agencies are overwhelmed. Some of these programs are because they're new and because they're overwhelmed, we think that they're getting slipped through quickly, and they're not getting the same diligence that they did before. And actually, a lot of the criteria and the length of the applications themselves has been reduced significantly. So some of these new programs, especially the NTIA programs and the rural programs, and then these capital projects programs, and especially Community Connect and Reconnect, the application process is quite a bit more streamlined than it used to be.
Jory, a general question I have in terms of implementation. Early on in this evolution of broadband discussion in the last few years, there was a whole lot of discussion about connecting anchor institutions and community networks. I haven't heard that in recent years through the COVID. Are you hearing that at all, or are municipalities not even thinking about creating their own community networks? And
municipalities are, when they're building within their communities, they are connecting community anchors, and they're connecting government facilities, especially public safety and water, wastewater, and education. So it's public health, it's public education, and it's public safety, which is coming first, and they're spending money on that.
And these funds can apply to that?
Yes, they can.
Okay.
Yeah, but keep in mind that the money that's available now is for economic development or for recovery and resilience because of COVID.
Yeah.
So that changes the game a bit. The rules are different, and so the application of the funds is somewhat different. Good question. Well, if there aren't any other questions, I'd like to thank everyone for attending and for your good questions. Bill, I'll send you a PDF of this, and you can do as you will to get it out, disseminate it, and other people can understand it. Yeah, and thank you all again.
Thank you, Jory.
Great. Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Thanks, Jory.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody, for attending. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Mhm.